This is 100 Years of Cox. You are listening to a podcast by Frances Thompson. I'm telling the story of 10 siblings from the Machell Cox family through the letters they wrote to each other. They were born in England between 1868 and 1884. 7 of them lived in England and 3 lived abroad in the colonies. In this episode, Avice draws many sketches, illustrating events described in her letter, which delighted her siblings. Check out my Twitter, I will post Avice's sketches there. Avice has been sent a new book called A Manual of Housewifery, which she is very pleased with. Neville travels around England, visiting his siblings, and he writes all about them in his letter. Vera has won her club's tennis championship again, and Vera and Neville go to watch the tennis at Wimbledon and describe some of the matches. Avice's letter. Garfield House School, Stoke, July 15th, 1907. Dear family, I have actually had 2 budgets arrive before I have sent off one. My student's budget arrived yesterday, and now I have a letter to write for our family budget as well. I am so glad you all liked my calling card, which I enclosed in the budget. Of course, no one else needs to put their card in. Mine was so important, as being the first I have ever possessed, and so beautiful too. It took some time for me to become accustomed to using them when paying calls, but I'm quite used to them now. Since I last wrote, I have got used to all my little notebooks, which I use with regards to the housekeeping here. Enid, they are not a waste of time. Indeed, they save time. Do you know what Enid sent me the other day? A small book called A Manual of Housewifery. It is really very good and sensible, with many good ideas, and it only cost a penny. I should be very glad of anything else of the sort, but I was rather amused. I see Arthur is good enough to praise my speech, although he gives himself the credit for my pretty talking. Certainly he doesn't give me much peace about my talking. He declares that I say nothink instead of nothing. He also says I say propperly instead of probably. You know, Arthur sometimes talks very indistinctly. One could even say he mumbles. The dinner party with Captain and Mrs. Horsley came off all right, about a fortnight after it was put off. There were only 4 other people there, as well as Arthur and I, and our host and hostess. Arthur looked beautiful in his new dress suit, which fits to perfection, and the postcard Mother sent me, detailing dinner party etiquette, was most useful. All sorts of things have happened here since I last wrote. Kate, the little housemaid, left, and I had to get another. I have now got a funny little servant. Her talk is most common, and she uses the most extraordinary expressions. But she's most willing, and she works hard. She needs some training, though. Aldwyn, I do sympathise you with changing boys. It involves a great deal of work. We've also got the sports on. Neville came to stay when it suddenly occurred to Arthur that we ought to be sending out invitations for the sports. We had forgotten they were so near. We had a good deal of bustle for a week, but I think everything went off fairly well on the day, though we had 2 sharp showers of rain. The day before it had simply pelted, causing Arthur much anxiety. Altogether, including the boys, there were about 150 people to provide tea for. I knew about half the people, but had to shake hands with all of them. I went to one good lady twice, and shook hands, and began to say I didn't know her name, when she told me I had already done so once already. She was rather amused. I've been to 2 at-homes by myself, which seem rather dull performances, but they are something I simply must do, even if I do not enjoy them. We have just received another dinner invitation from Mr. and Mrs. Clutton, parents, and very uninteresting, but I suppose we shall have to go. The small boarder, Froude, is sitting opposite me, writing his Sunday letter, and at intervals I tell him to keep it tidy. Unluckily, he has an upside-down view of my letter. Not a good example. Arthur is sat at the writing desk. He is writing an introductory note to a book of suggestions, which he is going to start on its rounds among the parents, for them to air their grievances and make suggestions, etc. I think it will be most entertaining when it comes back, and it will be interesting to see what the parents suggest. I shan't be able to read half of it, I expect. Really, some of the parents have the most extraordinary handwriting. I should always use my very best handwriting when writing a letter to a headmaster. This Tuesday, we expect to have the parents' cricket match, if the weather is fine. I think some of the mothers will have to be put in if we don't have enough fathers. It will be fun to watch. The fathers have to bat left-handed after they have made 10 runs. Arthur thought of an amusing new race for the sports, the hobble race. 2 boys have their legs hobbled together by tape. I have tried, but I can't illustrate this properly. I hope you can see the general idea. Bernard, your pageant for Sydenham would be a great success. I especially like episode 2 and the grand finale. By the by, I gather that the photos of myself that I sent home do not seem to have been appreciated, from what Vera has said. I believe they are much better than any professional ones which I have had taken. Arthur is very good at both taking photographs as well as developing them in his darkroom. I'm glad we've got 2 foreign contributions for this budget. It is wonderful to receive news from the foreign brothers. I do declare that Wilfred's writing is the worst in the budget this time, worse than mine, though perhaps nobody will agree. I decided to include some sketches, which are supposed to represent the different styles of walking of 6 different members of the family. The last 2 are not down quite as I wish. Can anyone fit names to them? Father and mother are not there. I have also sketched the Isle of Wight bicycling incident. I hope you enjoy my sketches. Your loving sister, Avice. Notes on Avice's letter. In his last letter, Arthur related how Mother had sent a postcard to Avice detailing the social etiquette expected at dinner parties. Arthur had read it with great interest, and he wondered why gloves should be half removed at dinner. Which half? He mused. Sadly, Avice does not go into detail. Around the year 1900, Victorian ladies all wore gloves almost all the time. There were many different styles of gloves for different social occasions, and gloves for wealthy men were popular as well. Of course, it was a sign of status. If you were wearing gloves, generally, you were not doing any work. Someone else was. As I write this, in August 2020, all Victorians currently don't leave the house without a face mask. I am, of course, referring to the state of Victoria in Australia, which is under stage 4 lockdown and a curfew, with compulsory wearing of masks outside. 120 years ago, gloves were essential in Victorian society. Now it is face masks. The Edwardian era was from 1901 to 1910, and the wearing of gloves by ladies was still a social expectation. A lady would need a glove hook or powder to help slide them on, especially for elbow-length evening gloves. If one was wealthy, one would throw away dirty or damaged gloves, rather than having them repaired or washed. Etiquette was very important. Gloves must be worn for dancing, however they must be removed whilst eating. World War I, a lack of leather and increased prices meant the glove industry went into decline, and by World War II, fabric was being rationed, sensible clothing became more popular, and gloves were out of fashion. Arthur's new invention, his hobble race, is what we now know as the 3-legged race. Avice describes 2 boys being hobbled together with their legs tied by tape. The term appears to have been first used in general between 1900 to 1905, but it seems that neither Arthur nor Avice had heard of the name 3-legged race in 1907, and presumably the idea of the race was invented simultaneously in different places at a similar time. Arthur was very creative with his ideas for races and games at his prep school. Avice drew a sketch of Arthur's new race idea for the siblings. Avice also drew stick figures of 6 of the siblings. She decided to have a competition and see if her siblings could recognise themselves and others from her drawings. The females are drawn wearing a skirt, but the men are harder to tell apart. Avice leaves space below her stick figures for the siblings to write down their guesses as to which stick figure represents which sibling. Avice also draws the Isle of Wight bicycling incident, where a motor car appears behind the cyclists, causing general alarm, and some of the siblings crash into the hedge. They continue to talk about this incident a great deal. In the 1980s, their children were still discussing it in their budget letters as well. And Avice also draws a sketch describing why Arthur didn't finish his previous letter, the one that Vera finished off for him. Bernard later says, "It looks like Arthur has just got out of his bath and Avice is encouraging him to put some clothes on." I will put all these sketches on my Twitter account. If you're interested in Avice's delightful little drawings, look up Cox Letters on Twitter. Enid's letter. Lodge Lane, Liverpool, 20th of July, 1907. Dear family, the delights of getting a budget are sadly spoiled by the thought that one has got to furnish a contribution one's self. But I do not think I need write much this time, as we must strike an average, and if we all sent such noble epistles as Cuthbert's, Arthur's, and even Vera's this time, the postage to foreign parts would be very considerable. Mother and Neville have just concluded their visit here, which we all very much enjoyed, though it passed much too quickly. The weather has been very bad, and poor Neville never felt warm enough. He does feel the cold, and declares that it doesn't feel like summer. He does not seem a bit altered, and he must certainly put in a contribution as soon as this budget reaches Sydenham. He has now seen all the members of the family and can give his opinion of the new homes he finds them in. We are rather disappointed with our Brittany photographs, for though we have got some nice ones, yet our percentage of successes is not as high as usual. Cyril has discovered since our return that the camera was not altogether light-proof. I hope the bicycling tour will be a great success. I am so sorry not to be able to join it. It is quite a disappointment, as I have not seen Edmund for 6 years. Whilst Neville was here, he fetched out all our maps, and he has sketched out a most delightful tour. He has taken a great deal of trouble over it, so I hope the weather will be propitious. You must all remember that if the tour should come to an end near Shrewsbury, you had better come on to Liverpool and look us up. Liverpool is getting very excited over its pageant in August. I paid 5 calls this afternoon, and everyone was talking about it. But I think it will be a poor thing after the various ones father has been to lately. The chief feature of the Liverpool pageant appears to be a gorgeous street procession with banners, and the Channel Fleet is coming to participate as well. However, we shall miss the pageant, as we shall be visiting Cyril's family at Clevedon. I wish one could see the Sydenham pageant, as sketched by B.M. Cox, Esquire. It would be grand. Wilfred's contribution is very welcome. It is always specially nice to get a letter from one of the foreign brothers. I do hope poor Aldwin is making satisfactory progress from his typhoid fever. I am afraid we shall not get a letter from him for a long time. I was glad to read Cuthbert's continuation of his walks in the lakes. However, he did not see Ullswater to advantage. I wish he could have gone up Ullswater to Patterdale, climbed Helvellyn, and then made a descent to Grasmere or Thirlmere, but that would have been longer than 1 day's walking. Dorothy, I must congratulate you on Christopher's astounding rate of growth. On June 21st, you wrote that he is 50 1/4 inches high, and then in a letter to Mother at the beginning of July, that he is 4 foot 3½ inches. An increase of 1¼ inches in 3 weeks is phenomenal. I tremble to think of his size at Christmas. But perhaps my remarks are due to jealousy, as Hazel is only 48¼ inches tall. Many condolences, Vera, on your bad luck in the Crystal Palace tennis tournament, but I do hope you will retain the championship of your tennis club. Avice, you have never told me what soda mints are, and I beg to state that I never sent you a manual of housewifery. I should think perhaps Bernard or father did. Cyril has just told me this. Deceit in a politician is called diplomacy. In other people it is called business habits. I don't know if this is an old chestnut. Cuthbert wrote to me and he said, Mother is fairly well, except that she has a vomit of beanbags. After prolonged study of his educated handwriting, Cyril and I decided that the true reading was not a vomit of beanbags, but a touch of lumbago. Dear me, I thought I was just going to stop, and now I remember I've got the literary supplement to tackle. I enjoyed reading Glen of Weeping by M. Bowens. This deals with the massacre of Glencoe. It is both exciting and interesting and very easy reading, but as history surely it is faulty. The authoress hardly succeeds in her story in establishing her contention in the preface that an impartial inquirer can absolve England of the crime of Glencoe. It was a military execution performed on rebels who were outside the law. It may have been fierce, hard justice, but it was justice. I really am too tired to write any more, and am quite horrified to find the length of this epistle. Farewell, everybody. Your loving sister, Enid. Notes on Enid's letter. There were 9 other book reviews as well. In almost every budget I read, I am amazed at the number of books that most of them have read in just a few weeks. Cyril was Enid's husband and was a keen photographer, which was an expensive hobby in the early 1900s. Both Cyril and Arthur had a dark room in their homes, and they talk about purchasing glass plates for the negatives. Edmund was also a keen photographer, but he was clergy and had less disposable income, and I don't think he could afford to have his own darkroom. I have no idea why Enid has not seen Edmund for 6 years. He was in the USA, in Kansas, running a store, whilst Neville was out there at the same time. Then Neville went to Africa, and Edmund returned to England to study theology at Lichfield. I can only assume neither Enid nor Edmund travelled to visit each other whilst he was studying. Enid paid 5 calls in one afternoon. Paying calls was clearly a serious business for ladies, which took up a lot of time, and I do wonder if she drank tea at every single house she visited. Enid's letter was the last one from budget number 7. Enid posted all the letters back to Sydenham to Bernard, who then started a new budget. Bernard also posted budget number 7 around as well, with his letter starting budget number 8, so everyone could read all the letters in budget 7. Once budget 7 had done the rounds and returned once again to Sydenham, it was then posted abroad for the foreign brothers to read. I'm frankly amazed at the distance that all these letters have travelled by post, and it's surprising how few have been lost. At the end of the 1960s, Vera was the only one of the 10 siblings still alive. The children of the siblings, as well as Vera, continued to write budget letters and were enjoying reading all the old letters and discussing the various exploits. Vera, as an old woman, eventually forbade the younger generation from posting the old budgets around England to each other. She said they were too precious to send in the post, and no more must be lost. My grandparents actually lost one of the old budgets at a Tesco supermarket in Leicester in the 1970s. They felt desperately upset at the loss, and this led to the old budgets remaining in Oxford, with Christopher and David, the sons of Arthur, and eventually being donated to the Bodleian Library. I have probably now read more of the budget letters than the cousins read in the 1960s and 70s. Bernard's next letter is the start of budget number 8, which was a mammoth one, including some long letters from all 10 of the siblings, as well as from Dorothy, Arthur's wife. There are also various accounts of the bicycling tour, and Avice provides more sketches, illustrating events just as effectively as a photo. Bernard's letter, Sydenham, 28th of July, 1907. My dears, the morning breaks, another dreary day. The summer sun we never more shall see. The postman knocks and plods his weary way and leaves the budget on the floor for me. I am amused at Cuthbert's letter of June the 9th, which begins, "It is summer at last." It must have been a mere flash in the pan. No one would believe that it is summer. I could write reams about the weather, but I don't think it would be appreciated by you all. I have received a quantity of photographs from Enid, taken during our tour in Brittany. I think, considering the difficulties under which most of them were taken, that they are very successful. Or should it be successful? Or successful? I have got quite muddled over the spelling of this word, but am inclined to believe that the first one is right. Arthur, how noble of you to trace our bicycling journey in your atlas. But surely you don't expect to find perfection in anything of Harmsworth's. Since I last wrote, Neville has arrived. Vera's description of the agonising at St Albans, whilst his arrival was hourly expected for a couple of days, is very true. His moustache is red, and his eyes are blue, but I won't expatiate further on his appearance, as you have all seen him by now. Vera says Avice kept her on toast when she was at Devonport for a week. Does she mean this to be taken literally? If you say that you have a person on toast, isn't it another way of saying that you have got him up a gum tree? I am reminded of an old story. Do stop me if you know it, but I shall be annoyed if you do. Of the lunatic who plaintively asked a passer-by for a piece of toast. You see, I am a poached egg, and I am so tired, and I want to sit down. I am glad Edmund is bringing his camera with him on our bicycling tour. I dare say we can arrange some interesting episodes for him to snapshot. If only we had a photograph of the motor incident in the Isle of Wight, there would not have been so many legends about it. Whilst I write, there is a band playing in the bandstand in Wells Park across the road. They are now playing Hark the Herald Angels Sing, most inappropriate in July. Avice, it was I who sent you the manual of housewifery. I dare say I can find you a few more of the sort if you like it. Your illustrations are first class. I do like them. When I first looked at the sketch of you and Arthur, I thought Arthur had just got out of his bath and was wandering about the house, and that you were trying to make him put his clothes on. By the by, the band now plays the church's one foundation. I have filled in my guesses for the family walks, and wonder if I have got them all right. Avice has captured some of us very accurately. Number 3 is unmistakable. You have captured that particular person quite accurately. The illustration of the bicycling incident is also splendid, especially Aldwyn on his bicycle, bicycling away at speed in a funk. The band is now playing I Was a Wandering Sheep. I enjoyed reading A History of the Papacy in the 19th century. This took me a long time to read, but it is very interesting, especially the section about Pius IX. I had no idea he was such an obstinate old pig in his latter days. Vera has again won her club championship. You will observe that she did not think it worthwhile to put on a clean skirt. She has been taking Mellin's food lately. Now I can hear A Few More Years Shall Roll. Really, it is a most extraordinary band. I also enclose a photograph of Aldwyn taking a class of natives in British Central Africa. Yours faithfully, Bernard. P.S. An early reply will oblige. Notes on Bernard's letter. He has cut out a clipping of Miss Sutton, who won Wimbledon in 1906, and he has attached a photo of Vera's head and included his handiwork in the budget. Mellin's Food Company manufactured soft food for babies and invalids, and I imagine Bernard is accusing Vera of messy eating and dropping food down her dress. In her letter, Vera indignantly replies to Bernard, "Strange to say, I do not feel flattered at being given Miss Sutton's body. I would rather never play tennis at all than look like that little elephant." I have no idea what it was about Miss Sutton or her tennis playing that so unimpressed Vera, or why Miss Sutton, who was an excellent tennis player, should be described as a little elephant. Bernard also includes a photo of a group of African villagers, onto which he has pasted a photo of Aldwyn. There is then a lot of discussion among the siblings about why the villagers are all intently looking at Aldwyn's feet. I will put both examples of Bernard's creativity on my Twitter page. There are so many examples in these letters of good humour between siblings who evidently cared greatly about each other, but also enjoy teasing each other and playing practical jokes. It is also clear how people invented their own entertainment through their own creativity. But also, some things don't change. I'm sure a great percentage of the poached eggs eaten today also sit on a piece of toast. Neville's letter, Sydenham, 30th of July 1907. Dear family, I have been informed that I must do my duty towards the budget whilst I am at home, and I'm told that it will be so easy, as all I have to do is to give my impressions on the various members of the family and their several domiciles. Easily said, but not so easily done, especially as I shall be in a helpless position if the family persuade me to attempt swimming whilst at Studland. For what a sweet, or rather a salt revenge, one and all could have, if I inadvertently trod on their toes whilst expressing an opinion. Excuse me, Cuthbert, if my memory serves me right, you are the one I need to apologise to. It is hard to know where to start, as I have written so many letters since I came home, that now I seem to be continually repeating myself over and over again. One thing I am very pleased about is that my beautiful hair seems to have given great joy to various members of the family. Others rejoice in my noble moustache, yet others in the poise and graceful carriage of my figure, and I have heard whispers about my dainty feet. I feel like that unfortunate individual in Patience, cursed with such magnificent beauty. Poor dear old mother walks calmly into booby traps set for other people, and Bernard enjoys a trifling rest in the middle of soup by employing the index finger of his right hand in gracefully twirling his neighbour's serviette ring. Vera combines amiability and punctuality with the functions of an oil can, though the frankness of some of her speeches is decidedly alarming. Father reminds me of one of the characters in Miss Hook of Holland, and is in great form. I find all at home very little altered, and all looking very well. And I like our new house infinitely better than the previous one in Dufferin Road. Opinions on various subjects are very divergent, and your humble servant is, I believe, the most obstinate. Father's method of closing an argument or discussion is the best, and generally acts most beautifully. I believe I was the excuse for a good many fires when I first got back, but I'm sure everyone was glad they had that excuse. My visit to Arthur was most enjoyable. He passed me some very doubtful compliments as to my personal appearance when he first met me on the station platform, but he soothed my feelings in a most charming manner afterwards. It is curious that I can never realise that he is actually married. I do hope I shall see Dorothy and my nephew before I leave. I found Avice most blooming. The Garfield House drawing room is a delightful room. We also had some delightful expeditions. One of them was most weird, as there was a thick fog. Arthur recalled the days of our youth most vividly, and he reminded me of our most daring deeds at Enville. I was initiated into the mysteries of Devonshire cream. I did my duty nobly and greatly enjoyed it. Arthur seems to have a most marvellous memory, and could recall stories and incidents concerning most of the trees and the nesting places we passed. Although it rained most of the time, I think we all enjoyed ourselves. We made an excursion to Rame Head one day and spent the whole day there. It was a fine place, and we saw a magnificent lot of floppadill docks on the side of the cliff. Arthur and Avice are most expert rock climbers, but I preferred a safer, if less elegant, way of getting about. The seabirds were really beautiful. Arthur had a bathe. He said he enjoyed it, but it looked most horribly cold. He most valiantly swam across a little pool, about 7 feet wide and 10 feet long. The depth was about 3 feet 6 inches. He was very brave, as there were a lot of little fishes in it. Arthur displayed all his old cunning on the way back. He saw one of his parents, by whom he did not wish to be seen, and cleverly avoided him. Avice and I looked over parts of Devonport she had not seen before, and we discussed the various battleships and destroyers in a most learned manner, but I don't believe we really knew one from the other. 2 evenings were spent most delightfully in Do You Remember, and we did recall all sorts of things. Arthur was in great form, and oh dear, how I did laugh over his drawings of me. He made, too, a caricature and a portrait. How Vera and Avice managed to get Mr. Moore to run up and down the stairs to raise the ghost beats me, and I did chortle over the idea. He is a nice chap, and no doubt invaluable to Arthur. The boys evidently like him. Altogether, I reckon Garfield House a very pleasant place to dwell in. The boys are nice and seem to enjoy themselves. Arthur feeds them very well, compared with the food I remember from our school days. And the boys have far more liberty than we ever had at that age. The school roundabout is splendid for expeditions and very pretty. I had various train adventures, both going down and returning, and am not in love with the Cornish Riviera Express. On returning to London, Vera and I saw the second day of the Test match at Lord's, and I very much enjoyed it. The next day Vera and I again went up to town, and we met Burr at Charing Cross. We went to the National Gallery, dined at Lyons in Piccadilly, and went to the theatre to see Miss Hook of Holland. It was amusing, but really absolutely nothing in it. Mother and I proceeded to visit Enid next, and were met by her and Hazel at the Liverpool station. My niece has grown a lot and seems very devoted to all her uncles. I like the Liverpool house much better than the one at Preston, and the big Sefton Park close by is a grand place. Neither Enid nor Cyril have altered, save that the former is a trifle stouter. I had a grand time there. Cyril took me to Chester one day by bike, and it is a most delightful place. Cyril is a grand hand at finding refreshment places. I wish he was coming cycling with us in September. We got a bit wet, but the roads were very good and no hills. We had a rather weird time at the place where we had tea. It was a Saturday afternoon, and there were plenty of motors about. The house stood at a crossroads, and we could hear the motors tooting and the noise of the engines approaching. Cyril would try and time how long it took from the first toot to the time they reached the house, and I would try and guess which of the 4 roads the motor was coming along. It was a regular nightmare, and how they avoided accidents I don't know, as they never seemed to slack up. How I do hate the beastly things when one is biking. Another day Cyril and I cycled to Buxton. We did have a rare old climb over the Derbyshire hills, rather faster than was comfortable, as we had to reach Buxton in time to catch our train back to Liverpool. And as the road was quite strange to us, we did not know when we should stop climbing. It was lovely country, and a most enjoyable ride of something over 50 miles. I went on several other short rides of an evening, with Enid and Cyril out into the country round Liverpool, and it was much prettier than I thought it would be. We played bridge nearly every evening, myself and Enid versus Mother and Cyril, and they were only about 100 points ahead of us at the end of 9 evenings. I went on from Enid to Edmund at Woolly Moor. As far as Bradshaw's railway guide is concerned, he is in an awful place to get to. But once you get there, You find the reverend gentleman in most scrumptious quarters. The farm is attractive. His sitting room is a dream of photographs and bound magazines, and he has one delightfully untidy table which cheered my heart immensely. Bernard, you will be pleased to hear that his inner man is very well looked after by the farmer's wife. He has milk, cream, eggs, and fruit galore. I advise any member of the budget who wants a change to visit their elder brother. I am sure they will be delighted. His miniature billiard table is a great attraction, and I was initiated into the mysteries of billiards, scoring 100 points, whilst Edmund made 300 points. It is a rather weird yet fascinating game. We also cycled to Matlock one afternoon, which is less than 1 hour by bike and very pretty. I left Edmund in thick fog on Thursday morning, lost my way to the station and had to run for my train, which was difficult with both bicycle and luggage. Luckily the train was late. A rather primitive station where you could get no change, and where the booking clerk liked to hold a conversation through the ticket window and did not like to be interrupted. I had to change trains 3 times in order to get to Berkhamsted, and it took nearly 5 hours. Cuthbert had nice small rooms quite close to the school with a wealth of books. His visitors sleep out, and he gives them a patent key to unlock his front door with. It is generally late when he goes to bed, and I don't know what Sherlock Holmes would make of the proceedings. We had rather bad luck, as Cuthbert could not get either afternoon off. The boys struck me as very free and easy. The head boy was a particularly nice-looking chap. I was let into various tricks of the trade and was quite shocked. I should say Cuthbert is very popular amongst the men and boys. Cuthbert, don't read this. And he seems supremely happy in his life, which evidently suits him. We had some excellent cider, which was dispensed whilst playing bridge on both evenings. His landlady is very superior, and has company over in the evenings to play bridge, etc. I was most struck with the awful accent the Berkhamsted street boys have, the worst I have heard yet. In the last few weeks I have heard Devon, Lancashire, Derbyshire and Cockney accents, so I regard myself as quite an expert now. I returned to Sydenham in time to run down to Wimbledon for the Davis Cup singles with Burr. We saw nothing very exciting, but some good singles between Gore and Brooks, as well as Barrett and Wilding. On Monday, Vera and I went to see the Wimbledon doubles, which was really splendid and awfully exciting. Vera damaged her umbrella stamping on the floor with it, and I made a lovely pattern on the boards with my umbrella. It was age and splendid tactics against youth and strength. I am awfully glad I saw it, as it was the first time I had seen first-class tennis. We also saw an exhibition game between Mr. Hilliard and Mrs. Chambers versus Mr. Eves and Miss Sutton. What a regular little elephant Miss Sutton is. We had tickets for the last day of Wimbledon as well. The singles between Gore and Wilding were very good, but Barrett was no match for Brooks, and England lost the cup by 2-3. Bernard, Vera and I slept the night at the aunt's house in Wimbledon on Monday, and they were very kind to us. They had hoped Hester and Carr were going to join us, but they were unable to come. We went to see Patience at the theatre on Tuesday night and greatly enjoyed it. Burr and Vera both chortled a great deal. I have done endless shopping for friends in Africa, and many parcels are delivered to Sydenham from all sorts of London shops. I actually dared to go into Peter Robinson's yesterday and buy a dress in the ladies' department. Now, don't you think that was very brave of me? We are now busy getting ready for Studland. The silver has disappeared, and we have to use our fingers chiefly at meals. It seems as if everything has to be packed away in readiness for us to depart. Mother flourishes a china soup ladle at dinner time and looks very warlike, and Father plaintively asks for the fish knives and forks and is disappointed. I went to see my sister win the championship of her tennis club again, so the bowl is retained for yet another year, and we celebrated the occasion with a bottle of wine. Cuthbert Why did you fail to return your letter? The budget has gone to Wilfrid without it. You must send it back to Mother. I believe you kept it on purpose, so as to hide up the delinquencies of poor Bernard. I did so want to see what had started the discussion. Dorothy, I do hope I shall manage to see you and Christopher this time. It seems such a long time since the Holdenby days. I've promised Arthur that I shall try and return to Devonport again before I leave England. Edmund, I quite agree with you as to the heats at the Berkhamsted sports. They are fearful and wonderful. Avice, I did enjoy your drawings, and the Isle of Wight cycle incident is too realistic for words. I have filled in my guesses as to the figures drawn by Avice. The figure of Budget Baby is very good. I wonder what Cuthbert will have to say about Avice's drawings. Enid, you did not say what a lot of help you gave me in sketching out the bike tour. All your maps were invaluable. I do wish you could come with us. I was very glad to see a contribution from Wilfrid. I have asked Mother to tell him to return the first edition of the budget. I am sure they ought to be kept and bound if possible. What do the other members say? I have left vacant a page for everyone to give their opinions. I was sorry to hear about Aldwyn. It is a beastly unhealthy place he has gone into, and I am glad he has got over his fever. I enjoyed his letter very much. Oh, Bernard, your illustrations are decidedly amusing, and your remarks as to the band are most appropriate. I was an additional observer, and Bernard and I really did laugh a great deal. It is a wonder how clearly music from the bandstand in the park can be heard in Longton Avenue. I never heard such a strange concoction from a band before. Bernard omitted mentioning the Amen, which they played in the middle of the selection. Well, I have run dry, and so I really must stop. Your affectionate brother, Neville. P.S. I have kept this waiting for Cuthbert to return from camp, and as he turned up last night, I must hand this on to him. We are now all at Studland, that is to say, with the exception of Edmund and Enid, and of course Aldwyn and Wilfrid are also sadly missed. I think it is a lovely place, the only drawback being the distance from the sea and the row of houses in front blocking our view. I must write more another time, but I think myself awfully lucky to have come to such a jolly place, and I am thoroughly enjoying myself. I have brought all my blandishments to bear on Mrs. King, our landlady. I believe she declares she is already fond of me. Now I get a plate of porridge for myself at breakfast, and as Arthur is a good boy, he gets any surplus after my plate has been filled. And he also gets an egg, all for himself, and a special supply of stale bread. I will leave it to Arthur to expatiate on Mrs. King's many qualities. The non-botanical members of the party, such as myself, have to put up with a terrible litter of weeds and dead abominations, which we are told are wild flowers. But as our drinking tumblers are generally used to preserve these atrocities, we sometimes go thirsty at mealtimes. Arthur has collected some fine shells. Father has got many one-penny travel guides and picture postcards. Avice has made a collection of hats and skirts and is continually changing. Vera is trying to collect shirt buttons for her various brothers' requirements. Bernard brought with him a noble selection of sixpenny novels and has apparently suited no one. Goodbye, Neville. P.S. Please use this page to express your different opinions as to what should be done with the old numbers of the budget. Neville, returned to Mother and bound, Mother to pay, as she sees the budget for nothing. Cuthbert, budgets should certainly be kept by Mother safely. Arthur, to be kept by Mother, Vera to be assistant curator and indexer. Edmund, don't mind what happens to my share, but the majority of the rest should certainly be kept and by Mother. Avice, I do mind what happens to my share. If any is to be kept, keep mine. But I think Vera would be overworked if she had to correct mine. Mother must certainly get them bound and pay for them and keep them in a safe place. Enid should be returned to Mother and if possible bound, possibly by Hester. Bernard. Bound if possible, certainly kept. People must leave margins if they want their contributions bound. Notes on Neville's letter. What a fabulous letter. Don't you love it when people come to visit and they describe things, including all sorts of everyday detail that is normally just taken for granted? Neville and Cyril not only cycle from Liverpool to Chester, but they also cycle from Liverpool to Buxton. That is a long way over some big hills, on bicycles which were probably heavy and probably only had 3 gears. I don't think I could cycle up those big hills. Arthur's wife and son, Dorothy and Christopher, are still in Terrington with her family, so Neville hasn't seen them yet. He is recalling when Reverend Dr. Cox was the parish priest of Holdenby, which was near Northampton in the 1890s. This was clearly when Arthur and Dorothy were courting, but not yet married, before Neville left for the USA and then South Africa. It looks like it has been many years since Neville was last in England. I looked up statistics for Wimbledon, and all the names Neville mentions are indeed the tennis players who played in the finals and the doubles. You can find photos online in which they are all dressed in tennis whites, and the women are wearing long skirts and often a tie as well. Apparently Miss Sutton shocked everyone because she rolled her sleeves up. It wasn't the done thing to reveal bare arms in public. It is also fascinating to read the opinions of the siblings, discussing what to do with the old editions of the budget. Wilfred, in his primitive hut in rural Canada, with a dirt floor and no power or running water, had misplaced the first 2 budgets which he had been sent. Thankfully he found them and posted them back to Sydenham, where Bernard began to collect them, and he stored them in the wardrobe. In the next episode of 100 Years of Cox, Arthur describes some events which occurred on the family holiday at Studland Bay in Dorset, including a duel between Neville and Arthur, not fought with guns, but instead they fought with ginger beer bottles, which had been previously shaken up. Cuthbert describes officer training camp and the 4-day march that the schoolboys undertook to get there. Dorothy writes from Terrington, and Aldwyn's letter describes his recovery from typhoid fever and the amount of hair he grew during the 7 weeks of his illness. Wilfred writes several letters, giving us a real insight into the long disappeared life of a frontiersman in rural Canada. Machell Cox Letters is on Twitter, where I share photos and sketches from the budget. Or you can send me an email, machellcoxletters@gmail.com. You have been listening to 100 Years of Cox. Thank you for listening.